This is a fairly long presentation, so I'm going to just dive right into it. We're talking about time and website design. To give you an overview of what we'll discuss, we'll talk a little bit about objective time and some psychological time management tactics, and then that will take us to our conclusion. Our source for this material is a series of articles called Why Performance Matters that appeared in Smashing magazine, and the link should appear somewhere, I think on the Meetup site, so that if you are interested, this is really just an introduction. If you are interested in these topics, then I highly recommend you check out that series of articles. All right, to start, some brief definitions. Objective time is clock time. Psychological time, on the other hand, is the time, is how we perceive time. So that might change depending on your state of mind, like what your mood is, how hungry you are, or if you have a deadline. Calvin here has a deadline for a book review, and so time is moving very quickly for him. Performance optimization is the process of improving your response times to meet your audience's expectations. A performance budget is the max amount of time that you set or your company sets for what your performance should be, what the response time should be. Why is time important? Every second impacts your bottom line, and if you are using your website to generate revenue, then it is extremely important that you have good response times. Studies have found that visitors will abandon your website after 3 seconds. Walmart found that for every second that they improved their website response times, they increased their conversions by 2%. And that might not seem like a lot, but when you're talking about millions or billions of dollars, then that becomes pretty significant. AutoAnything, another website, have their loading times and found their sales increase by 13%. This is a hypothetical question, but which site is better? We have one site that takes 12 seconds to fully load. These were measured on webpagetest.org. The other site takes 22 seconds to fully load, and these are kind of competitor websites. We'll come back to that. Psychologists have found that there are 4 pretty important durations for short time intervals. The first one is instantaneous response, and that is the response under 0.2 seconds. Our brains are not fast enough to perceive anything happening, so it seems like an instantaneous feedback. Immediate would be the response in human-to-human style communication. You can ask somebody a question. It takes them between half a second to a second to interpret what you're saying, frame a response, and then respond. So in that, there is a noticeable delay, but we're comfortable with it because we're used to talking to each other and getting response from people. The third one is the user flow duration, and that one is between 2 and 5 seconds. This is, so these were durations that were measured when viewing people responding to web pages and so on. And so they found that within 2 to 5 seconds, we're intensely concentrated on the task at hand. Our attention span is 5 to 10 seconds, and this is the time during which you are still focused on your task, but you're easily distracted. So when you are talking about your performance budget, I'd say the industry standard is between 1 to 2 seconds for your response times because of these durations that they found. So you want to capture your audience while they are still intensely focused on what they're doing. So coming back, however, your performance is just one factor within how you are dealing with your website. So you also have other factors to consider when you are working with developing your website. One is that you want to make sure your website supplies a need that your audience is going to want to come back to. You want to make sure it's reliable, usable, that they can find what they're looking for, the aesthetics are nice, and so on. So time neutralization is the fact of you might have a slower website than your competitor, but you have all these other factors that are at play as well, and so you want to make sure that the time factor is not going to drive your audience away. So there are definitely other things that you can do to make sure that your website is bringing your audience in. Now, going back to this, this comparison, we have the first website. That website had 84 million visitors, so it was a very heavily trafficked site. And that site was for Fox News. Now, this second website that took 22 seconds to fully load, which, based on objective time, should have less visitors, actually had 104 million visitors. This is for the month of April, for which I could find stats. And that was CNN. So, it's up to the eye of the beholder which site is better, but obviously that 22 seconds fully load time is, they have other factors that are contributing to the drive for audience to come to the website. But it's not just the other factors that are at play here. There's something else going on, so we'll go into that. For psychological time, there is this concept of an active wait versus a passive wait. An active wait is where nothing appears to be happening, but your mental faculties are engaged, such as this bike rider. He might not seem to be going, he's probably just out for a Sunday spin, but he doesn't seem to be really doing anything, but his mental faculties are engaged, he's working, he's probably taking in the sights and so on. Also, when you're solving a puzzle, it might not seem like you're doing anything, but you're still engaged in your activity. Then there's the passive wait, and passive waits are characterized mostly by the fact that you have a lack of control, either control over whether you're waiting or not, or the duration of that wait. And that is when we get angriest, is when we're in that passive wait mode. When we are passively waiting, psychologists have found that we tend to overestimate how long we've waited by 36%, which is pretty significant. So the conclusion, then, from that psychological study is that we need to be reducing the passive wait time that our users experience when they're visiting our websites. And you can do that in two ways. You can either make, they have the preemptive start, where you make sure that your audience feels like they're starting their activity beforehand, or you can have an early conclusion where the passive wait seems to end early. So we'll talk about preemptive start. This is a couple of examples in action. If you are viewing websites on your phone, so these are screenshots from an iOS Safari. When you make a search for a website, there is going to be that top hit, and what Safari is doing is as soon as it identifies that top hit, it starts downloading that page in the background, because the majority of people are going to download or click on that top link. And then when you do click on that link, you'll notice that there is a visual happening where one window gets replaced by another window. But while that little visual is happening, the download has started. And so those are two examples of preemptive start that are done by the browser. And how you can take advantage of the preemptive start in your websites is you can use resource hints, which resource hints is a W3C standard for, they have these 4 different types of rel attribute values on your links that you can use to tell the browser to start loading this page. So this DNS prefetch one, the top one listed, that is probably the most popularly supported by browsers. And you wouldn't want to use that on every link, because your browser will automatically do some prefetching for you. But what this does is if you have links that have a lot of redirecting happening, you might want to use that DNS prefetch to tell the browser to start looking up that DNS domain lookup. And then the other place to use it is when you have links further down on your page that are probably not going to be preloaded by the browser, but are very important to the user, that's another place where you might have it, the browser do some prefetching. Early completion, where you'll most commonly see this, is on your video streaming sites, such as YouTube. You'll notice that YouTube does not wait for the entire video to load to be available for you to be able to start playing the video. So what's happening is it caches a short part of the video, and then it will start playing it for you so that you don't have to go through that passive wait for that whole download. And where you can use early completion in your websites is you can load your page in stages where you have an initial load happening, which can be, like an ad or a search bar and so on. So you do an initial load, and then you use JavaScript to fetch other parts of the page and load them in the background. So this is what is happening here. You can see that this is Amazon. And though it takes 7 seconds to fully load this web page, the first second has a completely blank screen. But then after that, you'll start seeing that Amazon has loaded part of their web page. And so what it's showing is that you are eliminating 6 seconds of passive wait by doing the loading in stages. So when we go back to this comparison between these two sites, Fox News at the top here takes 12 seconds to fully load. Well, webpagetest.org gives you 2 different load times. The first load time is the difference in time between when you start that navigation and when the Windows onload event happens, the window onload event happens. And then the fully loaded time is 2 seconds after any network activity completes. So you can see here there's 2 seconds between the fully load time and the load time, which means that Fox News is pretty much loading everything at once. Whereas CNN has quite a big difference. That initial load time is 12 seconds, whereas the fully load time is 22 seconds. So they are definitely taking advantage of that early conclusion where they're loading just part of the page initially and then doing a whole bunch of fetching in the background. So in conclusion, your audience's time is very important. You start to lose it, your audience, I mean, if you don't acknowledge the fact that their time is important. And we have just touched on a little bit of objective time, your performance budget, and a little bit of psychological time with the preemptive starts and early conclusions. And like I said, if you are interested in more, go check out those articles. Any questions? We're doing good.
What was the site you were using for benchmarks again?
It is webpagetest.org. Yes. Oh, sorry. Good question. What was the question? The question was, what was the website that was used to grab this data? And that is webpagetest.org. Thanks, Jessica. Anything else? All right. Thanks a lot, guys.